Hey, Harry.
Good to see you, Leor.
Yeah, nice to have you here. Welcome to Paris.
Yeah, it's been hectic to say the
Yeah,
least.
great chat yesterday. We're going to be having that online as well pretty soon, so folks are going to be able to watch that. But today, we're going to be diving even deeper into your story, into your founder's journey, into what you're doing at Nym, and of course, some of your large and kind of broad thoughts on privacy. So now that we're here, let's get started. We should probably hear a little bit more about you and your background to
Yeah.
start with. So let's start from the beginning. Where did you start caring about privacy? When did it start? And let's take it from there.
Yeah, I mean, like many people my age, when I was quite young, we got on the internet at like 12, 13, but at that point, the internet barely worked.
Mm-hmm.
It was still the early days of BBSs, Telenet. Everything went over phone lines. All the passwords were default to password, and so I got really into early internet culture and file sharing, and it was an exciting time. And at that point in the internet's history, um, there was very little commercialization, and there was also very little encryption. Everything was just sent over plain text. There was, if things were really easy to hack. And then, I was a computer geek. So when I got to college, I said, well, it's the easiest thing I could do. So the college I went to didn't have a computer degree. They had mathematics. That's close enough. So I did mathematics with as much programming as they let me at Chapel Hill. And then I got a scholarship to go to University of Edinburgh in Scotland. It was really funny. I remember getting off the bus the first day there, and I lived in a place called Birdie House.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked the bus driver, I was like, "Yo, where is Birdie House?" He's like, "You mean Birdie Hoose?" And then I got off the out at my new house, a tiny little place, and it didn't say Birdie House. It said Bordeaux. I said, okay. Like everyone's mispronouncing everything. It's great. So I had a great time in Scotland, and I didn't actually focus on privacy or cryptography. Those weren't even offered really places. You couldn't do a PhD in that at the time. So I did AI, artificial intelligence, including some large language model work, some of the kind of early stuff behind, what we now know as ChatGPT. And we could all see that coming 10 years ago, but we just didn't have access to large amounts of data and computing power. And while I was a young student, I kind of naturally leaned towards science, and I had a lot of friends that were climate change scientists, and we basically got involved in climate change organizing. We held these kind of quite family friendly camps called Climate Camp, and we organized protests in order to try to get the UK to do something about climate change. Now, the problem was at that point in this is 2005 to 2010. People that believed climate change was going to be a large problem for humanity were considered extremist. Possibly even dangerous. So I had an undercover police officer.
Oh, was it that bad?
Yeah, it was that bad.
Okay.
I had an undercover police officer assigned to me because they were afraid that the protests were going to get too big.
Mm-hmm.
And I was one of the organizers, and things actually got scary at a certain point. We had undercover police following us around. Some of them were so deep. Some of them had been undercover 7 years, or even sleeping with women to get intelligence. Like sort of very bad behavior that came out in the news eventually when a few of them went crazy. Particularly one called Mark Kennedy. And I was a broke graduate student at the time, and I wanted to go. We were organizing around what was called the COP Climate Summit in Copenhagen. And which was the big kind of climate change meeting where they're supposed to negotiate a kind of climate deal. And the undercover, I was so broke, I didn't have a car ride to get there, so the undercover police offered me a car. It was really hilarious.
Okay.
I didn't know we didn't know they were undercover at the time. We suspected eventually. And then it kind of what happened is, I was targeted for arrest. I in Copenhagen at this climate summit. I didn't do anything. They basically, the police told me they were after me. They were going to disable, and they did indeed beat me up and put me in jail for a bit. And they also were like, they were going to my house, to the house of my PhD advisor, and they were just kind of harassing everyone. And I mean, I somehow managed to get my PhD in the middle of all of this. But then, I became very much more conscious of privacy. And I said, look, I still believe in everything I believed back then. I still believe that climate change is essentially, I mean, forget AI. Climate change is an existential threat to the survival of our civilization. If there's like a single scientific certainty, that is that unless we tackle this problem collectively using the power of the internet, humanity itself is at risk. And I think that's a reasonable position that more and more people have. And the danger of excessive surveillance is that it can lead to eliminating voices of dissent, even when the dissent is based on clear science. And it's really quite personally terrifying to be targeted that way. Things got so bad at a certain point. After I got my PhD, I went with my parents to France, but if I was stopped at the border, they were going to stop me, and they would like take my DNA against my will and all sorts of crazy stuff. So I actually ended up,
God.
it was so terrible.
That's terrifying.
I ended up having to most weirdest part of my life, I actually had to take a boat with a bunch, because I didn't want to get my passport checked because I didn't want to get harassed anymore. So I took a boat with a bunch of African immigrants to Morocco, out where there was no passport checks on the way out of
I can't
Barcelona.
believe this.
Completely insane. Yeah. Now that all calmed down because
Right.
what happened is the undercover police got revealed, and the whole thing it became a giant scandal in the press. Currently, we're involved in a legal case, and the Crown, Her Majesty, has an official inquiry into the misbehavior of what was called at that point the Special Demonstration Squad, or the undercover arm of the Met. However, that experience definitely changed what I want to work on. I was less, earlier I was more interested in artificial intelligence and using AI and statistics to help solve issues like climate change. I said, actually, what we need
for this to never happen.
This
again.
not to happen to ordinary people again.
Sure.
We need to have ways to defend people and their communications against excessive surveillance. And artificial intelligence is very good with very small amounts of data of figuring out things about you. So, I didn't, at that point, I don't think the blockchain industry really even existed. So I first went to work for Tim Berners-Lee, the inventor of the web. And he basically gave me a job. I thought I was originally going to do AI, but he said, look, because I was interested in cryptography, they put me in charge of an API called the Crypto API, a web crypto API, and I standardized, it's on everyone's browsers today, JavaScript crypto access across 1 billion browsers with Google and Microsoft. And hilariously, as I was doing that, I was, still being harassed. So, I showed it at MIT, and like the police would show up. It was crazy. So I got sick of that. But anyways, we can yeah.
No, but so that's where you kind of started this really, I guess at least at your core, I would say that this is where your cypherpunk journey kind of began.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously, look, like I've said this to all my friends, and everybody knows this. You're one of the kind of what I would call the OG, or the best representation of the cypherpunk movement that really started around privacy and the early internet. And you, of course, working with Tim Berners-Lee and just kind of feeling it so viscerally on your own merit, the kind of the difficulties. I guess that's what really pushed you into that world. And I guess the question that I have for you, just on that front, is did you even consider yourself, like how was that, how has that changed your, even your normal behavior? Did you kind of seek out other people that were looking to work on similar problems when you started working with Tim? What was the experience back then?
Well, Tim was always supportive,
Okay.
and I think Tim is a noble and a wonderful human being. Um, but Tim is not a cryptography expert. There's a reason
Right.
why the web, when it first happened, didn't have any encryption, and the reason is that that technology was almost unknown at the time. It
Yeah.
was still very secretive and sort of, and so you only had people like the cypherpunks pushing it forward and a few smaller research groups. And eventually the big turning point was Snowden, because after Snowden, people said, oh, wow, like our worst nightmare is actually true. The NSA is observing the entire internet.
Yeah.
Maybe we should fix things. And
Big shocker, right?
to everyone's credit,
Yeah.
like, Google and Apple and Mozilla and everyone came and really did fix that problem.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, but the problem is, I felt working under Tim Berners-Lee that encryption can be used both for lack of a better word, the common good. It can also be used for, I think, honestly, things which are pretty evil. I am a cypherpunk. I've always been interested in cypherpunk work and ideology. And one component of that is that the key should be owned by the users. And at the time, when I was working at MIT, there was a big push by Netflix, and eventually Google caved, and Google started pushing
Mhm.
it to do digital rights management to
Yeah.
basically prevent people from streaming Netflix, without paying for it. But that involved putting digital rights management or digital restrictions management into people's computers. And I didn't want to work on that. And I was against it. I didn't want anyone's browsers. So I said, look, I got to get a new job. And weirdly enough, I pivoted to France. I was good friends with a philosopher here called Bernard Stiegler, who was kind of studying technology, and moved to Henri de Paris. And I said, well, all my friends, let's reach out to some people who are interested in stopping mass surveillance and really building kind of hardcore privacy tech that I couldn't build as a web standard, but something that we could build and that would actually defend us against mass surveillance. And we knew kind of the components, but no one was working on it. And the European Commission was very angry after the Snowden revelations. They said, well, NSA spying on Merkel's phone, can we have some kind of like super VPN that can defend us against, even US, Russia, China style surveillance, where they can watch like with a god's eye view every pack on the internet. And I talked, I had friends, I was old friends with Roger from Tor.
Mhm.
We love Tor. It's a great product, but it doesn't defend against an enemy that can watch the entire internet on both sides of the Tor connection. So we said we need what's called a mixed net, which I'll explain a bit more about in a sec. So I called all my old friends and I said, look, is anyone interested in in building this like mixed net technology? And George Denises was at that time at Microsoft, but was moving to University College London, and we had met actually through some of these climate protests, kind of anarchist work. And he was so he would, for example, give us back when we were trying to organize what was early forms of social media. We would try. George was very useful in trying to say what servers could be taken out so that
Mhm.
they can't get the news out. How do we defend against that? And some of those people we used to work with in the climate change and anti-globalization protest movements. Some of them went on to found Twitter, for example. Evan Henshaw Plath, Blaine
Yeah.
Cook, but a lot of us kind of stayed in academia and research. And I said, well, look, from my old network of friends, who's really serious? And then we had Claudia Diaz, who been studying this work for 20 years, invented at the same time as George how to measure privacy using entropy. And I did my PhD thesis on entropy, so I kind of understood the techniques. And so we started getting this like basic, kind of R&D team together. And we built, we built like some of the an early version of a mixnet that could defend against uh, global surveillance, and I was like super excited. Uh, and we were thinking, well, maybe we could even sell this because
Mhm.
at some point, all the R&D money kind of runs out, right? And I didn't want to be begging governments for money, so um, we actually went. We started trying to see if we could do equity fundraising, and I did the first pitch for something that was more of a VPN, but would later metamorphose into Nym uh, at Google.
Hmm.
Interestingly enough, because they had like a pitch day,
Interesting.
and interesting enough, Chelsea Manning showed up for that pitch,
Right.
and at the time, even a lot of academics were a little bit worried about startups and commercial money and VC money, but Chelsea, who just spent 7 years or whatever in jail for basically being accused of giving U.S. Military secrets about the Iraq War to WikiLeaks. She was in solitary. She got out. She was actually very supportive, and that meant a lot to me. And we weren't sure uh, how we would go to the next level. And then, I had heard of Bitcoin pretty early on. Friends of mine, I'd met Amir Taki and Primavera Di Filippi at early Bitcoin conferences. Hilariously enough, I actually wanted Amir to be a PhD student with our money because he was the first person to notice the privacy problems in
Right.
Bitcoin. But then he went off to Syria to fight against Daesh. Great guy. But we when he came back, he was very supportive. So we had a lot of supportive people, both from academia and kind of activism and early Bitcoin days. And then we noticed like people that I really respected who were kind of part of our social circle, like Adam Back from Blockstream, or people that we knew through some of the W3C work, like Gav Wood from Polkadot,
Hmm.
which at that point was still Ethereum. They were raising a lot of money. And I said, wow, that's maybe we could do that too. Maybe we could actually raise enough money to really build this. Because from my perspective, as a person who was like, honestly, I have 1,000-page FOIA. I did a FOIA in the U.S. government, and it's about 1,000 pages long. I've seen, I had a targeted mass surveillance campaign ran against me, and I said, well, look, you know, this should not be possible. We need to build technology to allow dissent and freedom to flourish. And we have to be serious. We can't just make like another paper and another bit of like code that no one uses. I don't want a failed startup because I'd worked with Google, I had worked at MIT. I kind of saw the scale it takes to ship things to like a billion people. And it's a lot. It's a lot of work. So I said,
Mm.
we're not going to do this on 100K. We're not going to do this on even, we need to raise real funding. And that's when I started taking cryptocurrency very seriously because I said, this is our once in a lifetime chance to actually build the software that we know the world needs. That I needed like when I was in my 20s, that like my friends needed, that because we didn't have the software, people were unfairly targeted. Um, and we could build this. And that was to me, and that's, if we weren't sure like what the next steps were going to be. And, honestly, it looked sort of dubious. But then what happened is weirdly enough, we met people. This is a funny story. I was still working in academia and I was showing the Signal guys off our early mixnet. So I was the Trevor Parent, who
Mhm.
works on Signal, which is a very
Yeah. Yeah.
popular messaging app. And I was at a bar in Switzerland after an academic conference called Real World Crypto. And I left my, I was a bit drunk and I left my computer in the bar.
No way. Okay.
Okay. And I was about to jump on the train back to Paris. And I was like, man, I can't leave my laptop. That's terrible. Of course, it's Switzerland. So I walk back.
Laptop's there.
Laptop's
Yeah.
there. Hard drive is encrypted. It's closed. So, it would have been okay if it had been stolen. But
Yeah.
I was super happy. But then I had nowhere to stay. So I call my friends who are kind of in the kind of Zug Ethereum circles. I said, hey, what's going on in Switzerland? I'm stuck here. so I can get the next train out, back to Paris, probably the weekend. And they were at this conference called the Crypto Finance Conference, like 2017 or something.
Before
18.
DeFi was even a term, right?
Yeah, but it was like, some weird conference in
Yeah.
San Moritz. And I was like, man, I don't think I can even like afford staying in San Moritz. Oh, don't worry, we have spare space. So I go up there and I walk into the bar because I didn't have a place, I didn't have a place to stay at like Broke Academic at like, midnight. And there's all these kind of crypto people around a bar. They said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm building a mix." Then they were like, "Wow, that's amazing." I was like, "What? We should help you get funding." And they were really excited. And another little hilarious story. And this is my first time. Like, I hadn't really been around like total Bitcoin fanatics before, but we went skiing afterwards, and the people I went skiing with, they were like, "We're gonna pay the ski instructor in Bitcoin." This poor 17-year-old Swiss girl. And she was like, "Oh no, I want real money." And the Bitcoiners, "This is real money." And eventually she accepted it. And
it's a good trade if she kept it, right?
I hope she did. Yeah, this is 2017. It's gone up quite a lot, or 18.
Yeah.
And then one, the academic money was running out. We had kind of a team we had built academically, but we lacked kind of real programmers. And but then one of the guys I met at the bar said, "Hey, who I think's interested in funding stuff now is Binance." I was like, "Oh wow, that's weird." Okay, so we did a pitch. They accepted us. That was great. That was our first. We did what's called the Binance incubation program, and that kind of helped us. Me and Amir, we kind of developed first version of the wallet. Try to get an initial team together. But what we really lacked was like a real powerful dev team. We were still sort of just cypherpunk. So we made cypherpunk level code, which is okay, but not enough to really deliver.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I met you.
Right.
Because what had happened is that George and my friend Dave, who I knew from protest movement work, who had built some of the early social media sites, they had founded a company called Chainspace. And then Chainspace, I mean, you know more about this than I do, they got purchased by Facebook to build, what is it called? They kept changing the name, DM or Libra or whatever. Yeah. I mean, it didn't work. And
Dave did not last long.
No. Although Dave was just like, "Look, I don't really want to work at Facebook."
Yeah.
And so when he quit Facebook, I was like, "Wow, that takes like real cojones to like sell your company to Facebook, then quit."
Yeah.
And I knew, because Dave 20 years ago was an excellent programmer. So I said, "Well, Dave's hardcore. If we can get Dave involved with Claudia and myself, we'll have a real powerful core team." So Dave, but to get the team together, we need people to believe in us. And at that very moment, I think it's early 2019, like late 18, the crypto, I think October 8, 2018, I don't remember exactly, but like the crypto market crashed hard.
Yeah.
Like really badly. Like all the money just like left the markets.
Everything disappeared.
Even Binance was like, not looking so good. And I was like, man, like we have to do fundraising in the world's worst funding environment. And Dave said, "You should talk to Leo. He's a cool guy." And so I remember I invited you to France, or you were in France anyways.
Met you at Enria.
Yeah, we met at Enria. I explained like in 3 hours all the stuff we were doing. You were like, "We know, you took a big bet on us." And you said, you basically said, "Look, I'm in." And then the combination of you being in with a few of the other exchange-based investors like KR1, Limnus Cap, some friends of Binance, NGC, that really, that let us raise like $2 million in the middle of like the worst bear market ever. And all of a sudden, when we had that money, all the people who were previously been like, "Yo, I'm just going to, maybe just keep doing academia," they got really excited because they also, you can't publish papers about something for 20 years and not really want to build it and get in people's hands. Right. So Claudia came in, Dave came in, Jess came in. We took the best students that we had from all the academic research we'd done, like Anya and Andrew. Andrew Petroska really invented the core mixnet design called Lupix. That was like a revolutionary change over the previous mixnet designs.
So you got together this real kind of privacy mafia in a sense.
Oh, we said we're gonna get all the best people.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I saw like so early on. I mean, as soon as I understood that, and look, I have worked with Dave at Chainspace, specifically funding him, and then seeing the passion that he had for privacy was actually, I was like, hey, this kind of makes more sense than him working at Facebook and trying to scale whatever was happening there. And so as soon as I saw all of you guys kind of come together, I was impressed because I was in regardless. But then seeing you put together this incredible team of folks that you've known for decades.
Yeah, that helps a lot, actually.
Yeah, was really interesting. And so, like, how unique is it? I mean, it seems to me like all of the best Mixnet people in the world are now working with Nym.
Yeah, I mean, David Chom has CMix, which is a good system, great system with Elixir. That's about it. It's a very different design. It's his original design. But what we did is we basically said, look, we need to build not just a privacy enhanced mixnet, but like a fast mixnet. It has to be like really like.
So let's actually break it down. What now that we're talking about Nym? So I mean, the context here is phenomenal. But I really want to be able to kind of oversimplify all of these relatively technical terms. Obviously, we've been studying this stuff. I mean, you for decades, myself since I met you. But can you tell me what is a mixnet? And then let's go even deeper into what Nym is and how it's activating all of this research.
So cryptography is the art of hiding, or science almost at this point, of hiding your message content. When I send you an email, I send you a message, I can still say, I know who's emailing who. Like the email, like Gmail knows that I'm, even if it's encrypted, we're using Signal, it's encrypted. The Signal server, someone even watching the Signal server can figure out that I am messaging you. Who's talking to who when.
Yeah.
That's the metadata. So the data is the message and the metadata is who's talking to who, which makes essentially a social graph, a map of all of our human connections. And there have been early work invented by David Chom in the 1970s and 80s, and then implemented by the cypherpunks to create what's called a mixnet. And a mixnet basically solves the problem of how do you disguise the metadata. And it solves it in this kind of very simple manner where rather than I send you a message directly, I send you the message indirectly. I pass it through, let's say rather than give it to you immediately, a
couple of checkpoints.
Yeah, right? I give it the message to this computer and then it kind of comes out on the other end after going through one or two more computers. But like with Tor or VPN, I send the message to the computer and it goes either immediately out or through one or two more in the case of Tor and then out. Yeah. But the order of the messages aren't changed. Like the messages are first in, first out. And what a mixnet does is it essentially mixes the messages. It's a bit like spam. It does what it says, it does what it says on the tin. It mixes the message up. It's like if each message, each like email is like a card. It like collects a bunch of cards and it shuffles them like a deck of cards. And so they come out in a different order. So the messages are both encrypted and mixed up. And that's what makes them private. If you don't have enough messages, you can add fake messages in. And there's some interesting, I just want to say this because it's not super well known. There's some really interesting cypherpunk history here.
Yeah.
When I got involved in encryption back like my early 20s, we were running email servers and one of the emails, and journalists would use this, journalists who were like hiding from the Italian mafia would use early software built by George Denises called Mixminion or Lynn Sassaman, who some people think is Nakamoto. I knew him. I'm a little bit doubtful. They would use this to hide from the mafia, that they're sending this message, or that because they didn't want anyone to be able to track this kind of leak or this news story or this confidential information. And so the software existed, but it was so slow, it would only work on email. And then the problem is, if you make email anonymous, what's one of the problems? We have spam.
Right.
So every spammer will use it to disguise, their spammer address. So Adam Back basically said, well, could we, rather than whitelist good people, say who's a spammer, who's not, could we just make the spammer do a little bit of work so they're not incentivized to send spam?
Interesting.
And that was proof of work. That's how proof of work got invented. Proof of work, solving hash puzzles, was invented as a spam prevention technique for mixnets. So we don't know who Nakamoto is, but whoever that guy was one of the probably 20 or 30 people running these email servers that used mixnets. And they said, oh, that proof of work concept, I wonder if I could use that in a consensus algorithm. That's how kind of Bitcoin took off.
That's crazy.
That's crazy. Totally crazy.
So proof of work was actually a concept taken from the prevention of email spam.
Exactly. Yeah. Because mixnets allowed anonymous email. But, we were like, how can we deliver this technology? Like George and Nick Mathewson and Lynn Sassman, they'd all been working on it like in 2001. In 2000, like maybe 5 was the last software update. We were using the software more or less without changes up until like, 2015. And we're like, man, it needs, someone should work on this. But everyone was working on Tor and, other things. So we said, well, let's revisit mixnets, and can we make them so that they're faster and more anonymous?
Right. So that's my question. Why, essentially, like, why have mixnets not taken off? Was it the performance issue? Was it okay?
Historically, it's a performance issue.
Interesting.
And historically,
where is the performance issue coming from? So was it a lack of incentivization? Because I know that.
Well, that's one, one reason.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So one reason is, why would you run these like nodes that would mix up people's email? Like, running a server cost money.
Right.
And there was no business model on top of it. There's no way to make money doing this. You could maybe, because you can't, like, before there was Blockstream, there was zero knowledge systems. They actually tried, Adam Back and Ian Goldberg and other great cypherpunks tried to kind of sell mixnets, but they had this problem where there was no digital cash. So I'm going to pay with my credit card with all my personal data to like to buy anonymous internet.
It defeats the purpose.
Defeats the purpose. Yeah. So they had some problems, and there was another generic issue, which is, how to scale it, right? So if you send a message to another computer and you mix it with other messages, you send them out, what do? Do you wait till enough messages arrive? Like, when do you do the mixing? How slow is that mixing? And so what Nym does, which is a concept from Anya Petrowska, is we use what's called a continuous time mixnet. So that means we get a message and we don't just shuffle it like a deck of cards. We actually just delay it a randomized amount, chosen something a little bit complicated called a Poisson distribution. The Poisson distribution is a mathematical way of kind of delaying things or randomizing things that lets us know the average time. If you send a bunch of messages, the messages will be released.
Yeah.
And furthermore, if there's not enough messages in the system, you can produce fake messages to kind of increase what's called cover traffic or dummy traffic,
right,
to increase the anonymity of all the participants in the system. So these kind of fundamental innovations of basically adding a business model so that you could have these servers running, this kind of new mixing technique, continuous time mixing, which basically let you kind of fine tune how much mixing you had, and adding fake traffic really lets mixnets do something they weren't able to do before. They were just for email and they were quite limited, and now they can scale horizontally. So like blockchains have trouble scaling because it's essentially an auction for like limited blockchain space.
Right.
There's only so much block everyone wants in.
Yeah.
With mixnets, with the new mixnet design that we've put forward, if there's more people want to use the network, we just turn on those incentives. More people turn on servers, and they jump in. And that jumping in basically like lets the thing scale to match demand. So you have like a supply, which is all the servers, and demand, which is people sending in traffic, and you can shrink. It's like a market. And we think that's very resilient. So we said, well, look, people had actually tried to add reputation systems to mixnets like in the 2001, 2005. There's papers from 99 talking about it. But the problem is that we didn't have any understanding of modern cryptocurrency. We didn't have smart contracts. All this stuff didn't work. So now we looked at Nym. So we found the startup called Nym. We get all, the great privacy folks in. We get Dave, we get Claudia, we get Anya, we get all the people that were working with us. And then we said, we're going to basically hammer out, and Aglos Kiayas deserves a lot of credit from this, from Cardano, Aglos, who ran one of the Mixnet research project Panoramics with me, and Claudia, and also is a great computational economist. We basically figure out how we could say, if there are these tokens and the Mixnet is doing this mixing, how much can we reward the servers so that they can make enough money to keep their servers on, make profit, and keep the network running and scale it and shrink it to match demand.
So in a sense, the blockchain, so the innovation around blockchain technologies and cryptocurrencies was almost like the missing piece.
Yeah, totally.
To making mixnets usable, sustainable, and scalable, right?
Yeah, we didn't know how to scale them. We didn't know how to make them financially sustainable. And we didn't, and all of a sudden, all of the key pieces, like, Nym runs its reputation system with the Nym. We made a token, the Nym token.
Yeah.
The Nym token represents your reputation. Are you doing your mixing properly?
Yeah.
Do other people delegate you Nym token? They think that you're a good person. So you're like the EFF, you're like ACLU. People will delegate to you. You're some weirdo, like from the NSA.
Are you a good mixer? Right?
You're from the NSA. Maybe people won't delegate to you. Right.
Yeah.
So what happens is that the combination of a reputation system and judging the performance can all be kind of abstracted away, put away from the mixed node in a blockchain. The blockchain can keep track of everyone's reputation. And the blockchain also solves a critical problem with Tor and VPNs, which is when I start up Tor VPN, how do I know what's the entry point?
Right.
How do I choose my path through these other people's servers? And previously, this was all done with centralized directory authorities.
Yeah.
You talk to NordVPN. NordVPN says, yo, here's the list of all the IP addresses. But what if NordVPN's compromised by the Chinese government? They give you a bunch of honeypot addresses, or they just get blocked. You can't get into your VPN. The censorship resistance via peer-to-peer broadcast of and replication of a blockchain system actually very useful to help people discover how I can hook into Nym. And then once I've hooked in, what's the reputation of all the nodes? I choose the best nodes to send my network traffic through. And so the Mixnet essentially serves as a super VPN on the level below the blockchain, but the coordination, the orchestration of all this stuff is done currently via Cosmos blockchain. We had it on Liquid, which was a Bitcoin sidechain for a bit, and then we moved to Cosmos, and so far we've been pretty happy with Cosmos.
That's okay. So there's so much going on here, and I really just want to hone in on this fundamental value that you're now bringing to this new world or this new age of the internet, right? So Web3 and cryptocurrency, in a sense, has revived a lot of interest in privacy, specifically because of how transparent and how inherently transparent these systems are. We now are kind of going back and starting to value privacy in a sense. And what we've seen with Nym is just how foundational it can be for this entire movement. And so there's many projects that are working on different privacy enhancing technologies like zero knowledge, like different types of encryption, which we're not going to get into immediately, but specifically projects like Aztec that are now leveraging Nym to actually offer full level or network level privacy to their users. I really want to be able to kind of dig into that, because a lot of folks are hearing, okay, there's a lot of crypto privacy projects or Web3 privacy projects out there. Why is Nym so different? And maybe you could tell me where you guys sit in the stack of privacy.
Yeah, I mean, just on a personal note, when I was at MIT, across the office from me, because we were all in CSAIL, the computer science department, was Madaris Versa, who was working on what became the original Groth16 ZK Snark compiler. So we were very familiar with zero knowledge proofs. This became Zcash.
Yeah.
But, Madaris was on the original Zcash paper. But the problem we saw with Zcash is that, Zcash, if you're making a transaction on chain,
right,
you can make that transaction private on chain. But that's not how the NSA works. That's not how chain analysis works. That's not how, if I want to observe who's talking to who's sending money to who, I can ignore the chain. The NSA just watches who sends messages to who.
Right.
They create their own chain. They have a database. They just track all the messages. They make their own private little database of who's talking to who, and they store it forever. And cyber criminals do that. All sorts of national intelligence agencies, all sorts of companies, Chainalysis, Elliptic, they all do this. It was clear, even in 2015, Chainalysis was running enough Bitcoin nodes to monitor the underlying network peer-to-peer broadcast. They would say, oh, you want to send a Bitcoin broadcast? These full nodes, they get the Bitcoin broadcast, they can track down who sent the Bitcoin. Same with zero knowledge systems like Zcash or Aztec. You can make a zero knowledge proof and want to put that on a blockchain, but you still have to send that to all like the full nodes. And just by watching those full nodes, you can figure out who's talking to who.
Right.
Who sent that transaction. You might not know how much it's for, but you kind of know where it's going and who sent it at what time. That's often,
which is actually the most important part. Right?
Yeah. There's actually amazing work from Sandy Pentland, who I used to work with at MIT, basically saying, look, me and you are talking, but I can learn a lot just by viewing the pattern of our communication. And a lot of human behavior, like not obviously this conversation, but a lot of human behavior is completely predictable just by looking at the turn taking and the timing behavior of who's talking to who, when, and where.
Right.
It's a great book called, I think, Social Physics on this. And so what we said when we looked at these blockchains, we said, no matter what you're doing with a zero knowledge proof or anything else on chain, you need to defend the network level. Because if you don't defend the network level, every time you use a blockchain, you're effectively revealing your identity. You're doxing yourself. And we need to make this super secure. So even people from like Bitcoin Core saw Nym launch, they're interested in the underlying tech because it's a problem that affects every single blockchain. And so zero knowledge is important, but it's ultimately what I would call a fragile primitive. It needs set up properly, and it works only on one layer, on the blockchain layer. And if you want real privacy, like if I use a VPN by logging to Facebook, Facebook still knows it's me.
You need to go lower.
You need to go lower. You got to go to the fundamentals of the internet itself, TCP packets, UDP packets. And that's what we defend. We give what's called network level privacy. And we can give that not just to blockchain systems, but to any system. We can give it to Signal. We can give it to WhatsApp. We can give it to your web browser. We can give it to anything. And that's, I think, so that's why Nym is like a fundamental, innovative technology.
Yeah.
On the network level. And that is it was just missing when we saw this blockchain work. We're like, man, this whole thing is missing, and we need to build this anyways. We've been working on this for years. Let's do it. Let's go for it. And so you can't. So it's not like we are competing against other blockchains. We're not like some other new L2 or L1 or whatever.
You're an enabler in a sense.
We're an enabler of any blockchain to have privacy on network level, and not just any blockchain, but any app. And eventually we hope by end of the year to launch a kind of VPN-like system for any person, even if they're like super non-technical, just be like, I want my internet connection to be private for whatever reason. And we just want them to be able to turn that, mix that on. And we think there's a big market. If you look at the VPN market, it's one of the biggest markets on earth. It's like 1 out of 4 alive humans has used the VPN. There's more and more internet censorship. Mm-hmm. There's more and more surveillance. Our current user base, from what we can gather, I mean, it's an anonymous system, but looking at the messages in Telegram and our channels is like mostly Ukraine, Russia, Turkey, places that are like, pretty hectic right now, to say the least.
Places that probably need privacy. And
they're interested, and they realize that they need really not just a VPN where the VPN can reveal their identity, but they need something much more hardcore, basically. Right. But we think, it used to be encryption was hardcore. It used to be like using TLS was hardcore. But without TLS, random people in cafes can like steal your password to your banking account. You couldn't have eBay or Amazon without encryption on the in the web browser. But there's a limit. Encryption only defends the content. You also have to defend the metadata. And we believe that privacy enhancing technologies will particularly based on the Web3 ethos, can create whole new business models that were like super unimaginable
Right.
before. I quite strongly believe that, and
And that model, so the kind of the two-sided marketplace
yeah.
model that you've implemented and that you've built, do you believe that that's the fundamental kind of way to enable competition, therefore scaling performance? Because
Oh yeah, yeah.
I do think that performance is probably one of the last things that I want to talk to you about as part of this segment on Nym specifically, which you've done so much explanation on already. But I mean, let's talk about performance, because I think that this kind of notion of, well, decentralized systems are great, but they're not performant, or they're not as performant as decentralized systems, which is then I think seems to be still a point of contention for a lot of the everyday or normal users or consumers. So I want to ask you, where does performance scale in a system like Nym, and how do you see Nym scaling performance-wise over the next 2 to 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, performance changes over time as computers get better, the internet gets better. So, like it used to be, people said, "Oh, we can't add encryption to the web, even though you need it for like basic financial apps, because if you do, web pages will load slower because there's some encryption going on to
Right.
hide the."
Yeah.
You know, it ends up that at a certain point, that's fast enough, it's barely perceptible,
Yeah.
and everyone uses it. You turn on a VPN, there's a little bit of delay, but not much. And Tor is getting faster as well. So we think, you know, if you couldn't have launched a production industrial mixnet like a year, even like 5 years ago, because the internet and computers were just too slow, now they are faster. And so the question is, how fast, how performant can we get it? And we actually had an interesting problem. We were working with ChainSafe, which is an Ethereum company.
Yeah.
And they have this problem in Ethereum where we have all these validators and there's a consensus algorithm. And the consensus algorithm is kind of deterministic. So you can predict who's going to get the next, you know, be the next validator in the proof of stake algorithm.
Yeah.
And in theory, you could DDoS attack. You could attack that validator, knock them out, and prevent them from getting their money. So the validators kind of need to hide their IP address and some of their information. And we said, well, could we put them behind a mixnet? That's a great idea from Micra. And we took it up with ChainSafe. And it ends up, we said, well, how fast can we make the mixnet go? And we can get it, if you turn the Poisson delays off, within half a second, which is so fast, it basically fits into Ethereum consensus block time production.
Wow. Okay.
But the thing is, you know, we believe to each his own. So different apps will want different levels of privacy. If I'm sending an email, I may not care if it's 20 seconds late. I may want that extra bit of privacy. So I may say, I want to mix for 20 seconds. If I'm web browsing, I'm watching a movie, you may only want a few second delay. Maybe, you know, for instant messaging, a few seconds. For other things that are super high performant, you might want to turn those delays off, sacrifice some privacy, go down to half a second. And the key thing about Nym is we let the applications fine tune what level of privacy they want. And eventually, you know, we don't have this in the UI yet. Advanced users, but you can do it in the code itself if you're so interested, should be able to fine tune the exact parameters to basically choose how anonymous they want to be. And the cool thing about mixnets, as opposed to VPNs and Tor, is it's kind of understandable how anonymous you are. We can measure it. We can say, look, you know, if you wait 5 seconds for your message to go through, you can be 1 out of 100 people. You can be, if you wait a minute, you can be 1 out of, you know, 800 people, whatever.
Yeah.
We can figure that, we can tell you that. And the nice thing is it scales well. So the thing about privacy is privacy loves company. You need a crowd. You need a bunch of people to hide your traffic in. You can't be private. Definitely can't be anonymous if it's just you. If there's only the mixnet has one user, you're screwed. So we have an incentive to get more and more users. And the more and more users you have, the quicker it gets for the same amount of privacy. So if I want to be anonymous among 100 people and I only have 200 people using the mixnet, I got to wait for half of them to come online to be private among 100 people. But if I have thousands of people using it once, I can get the same 1 out of 100 possibilities of being anonymous, you know, harder to find me out. I'm a person hiding in a crowd of 100. Much quicker.
So performance scales with usage.
Yeah, basically the more faster the mixnet is, and it can maintain the same level of privacy as long as there's enough users using it to support it. And if the usage goes up, we can make it even faster. So right
Interesting.
now it's early days. So, yeah, it's a bit slow, but as more people come on board, it's actually going to speed up. And we've also like hired, I mean, we're doing a bunch of, Chelsea Manning is working on hardware security. We've hired a bunch of top-notch cryptographers to speed things up. We think Karthik Bhargavan, Daniel Bernstein, so forth and so on contracts. So we think that we can do hardware acceleration as well eventually. And this thing should be blindingly fast. That's our goal, because we don't think people will accept long waiting times, but
Right.
people still want privacy. So can you give them both? And we think the answer is yes. And we can make that performance like within an acceptable amount of time for most people.
And if you okay, so first of all, that's it's great to hear, because I do think that the idea of scale and performance is at the center of everything that we're building here in Web3 and crypto. And I think that the systems that you are now designing, specifically with the best people in the world to be working on these ideas and to be solving these problems, it's at least you're taking the right approach. And right now, I think this idea of being able to bring more folks and to this network, and to getting them closer to the idea of privacy, well, making it even a better product, a more superior network, is something that I really love. And I think that actually brings me to another point that I wanted to explore with you before we kind of wrap up here, and that's the idea of the why of around privacy, and what is to bring folks into the world of privacy. And I know that we've had numerous discussions
Yeah.
about this, and I know that actually earlier this year, what was it that I actually spoke on one of your panels?
Yeah, exactly.
At a Nym event, we were talking about how important privacy is, even as a market, even as a as an ethical and philosophical question as well. So let's start there. You talked about the idea of dissent. You talked about the idea of the importance of being able to voice dissent. What does that mean for you, and where does privacy fit in that kind of category?
Yeah. So privacy, people often think is like a luxury good. Like a boutique feature you may add on to WhatsApp or to your browser. You're going to private browsing mode, or worse, you think that something is dodgy, something that's sketchy, something that like maybe you're doing something bad.
Right.
But societies evolve by giving people freedom to create and think in new and different ways since the beginning of time. And we are at a special point in human history. I was under surveillance, but I was under this, maybe one of the last people to really have this kind of like personalized surveillance, police officer following
Right.
you around and this sort of stuff. But today, when you turn your phone on, that data is stored by Google, accessible by a government, sold without your knowledge often. And you're under surveillance all the time. And, when I send a Bitcoin transaction, that Bitcoin transaction is under surveillance by multiple parties. When I'm talking to you, because my phone is on, there may be 1,000 people listening. And this is the first time in human history where there's actually an industry out there to surveil and control people. This is dangerous. This is what Bernard Stiegler points out. It causes a short circuit in human development. It doesn't let us think into the far future.
Right.
People are trying to modify our behavior through dopamine hits, through censorship, through content moderation, through algorithms to make us whatever. Currently, just like buy stuff, but also like shape how we think, who we vote for. And I think this is dangerous. And people don't, it's not like conspiracy theory. These companies have thousands of programmers running huge big data experiments constantly, trying to optimize how they can impact human behavior. And I'm not so worried about advertising. I think advertising, push comes to shove, is relatively harmless.
Right.
But I'm worried about how this machinery could be used to politically manipulate people. We're starting to see that come into play now. And so we have these kind of new class of electronic puppet masters. And the danger is not that it's just unethical, but that it stops social progress, that it actually could cause a halt to human freedom at the very moment where we have these global scale issues. We have climate change. We have return to nationalism. We have a return. We have, a social catastrophe, an ecological catastrophe, financial catastrophe, all hitting simultaneously. And we need the best minds in the world to work on it collectively, to establish via decentralized blockchain technology, ideally, a kind of new kind of collective intelligence. But unless you start from a position of privacy, you open yourself up to manipulation and being censored and silenced. So we think that actually things may not be very bad now, but it's a safe bet to say they might get worse before they get better. I'm a long-term optimist about human nature. I believe it is within our capability as humanity to solve all of the problems that collectively face us, because we as humanity created this world around us. It's our labor. But in order to do that, we need to have freedom. We need to have creativity, and we need to not be under constant surveillance and constant threat. And I think that privacy technologies are the foundation
of democracy.
Of democracy, yeah. And not just democracy, but just the foundation of freedom in general.
Yeah.
And that, Google doesn't want China looking at their servers. China doesn't want the US government looking at their servers. Right. I don't want Chainalysis looking at my Bitcoin. You don't want, everyone has something they're worried about. Mm-hmm. And people should have the autonomy to free themselves from these concerns and to do what they need to do, whatever that is. And I take essentially like a Pascal's wager kind of approach. So people say, well, look, bad people might use the network. Well, bad people use highways, right? Bad people live in houses, right? So, you can't, what can you do, right?
Yeah.
But I'm kind of positive. I think, I'm not negative about the internet. That's why I'm building this technology. Technology shapes and alters fundamental human behavior. And if we can build technology which can encourage human freedom, we should. And people, the vast majority of people, I believe, are fundamentally good. If given technology to improve their condition, to communicate with other people, they will creatively and effectively solve whatever problem the world is throwing at us. And that's why I really work on Nym. And I take a bet that the good that will come from Nym, the good that comes from human freedom, outweighs any kind of negative possibilities. It's a strong bet, but again, even if there's like a 1 in 1,000 chance to get through the next 100 years, to get through climate change, to reshape our politics, to be more decentralized, more democratic, more feminist, we should do it. Let's go for it. And we have, and the main problem is everyone's just slaving away at a Google office or writing papers so they get tenure. It's not going to happen. You need people building the code now to enable other people, not just other coders, but normal people, ordinary people who confront these problems, particularly in the global South, to take this technology up and go to the next level with it.
So that's a very powerful statement around the philosophy and potentially the ethical argument for privacy, and privacy's foundational place within democracy, and like you said, the human freedom, which is foundational to just the human condition, in my opinion. And of course, what we see where freedom is not present, what that does to humans. So I completely back what you're saying, and I think that you talked about bringing it to the average person, and this is where I believe that things are a little bit slow, are a little bit lackluster, right? Because this idea of, my little sister who's 14 probably doesn't even understand or internalize the fact that whenever she's sending messages on TikTok or Instagram, I don't even know how this stuff works anymore. This is not two-way encrypted, right? I mean, that, let's just begin there. But furthermore, I think that there's this idea of maybe there's a lack of market around privacy right now. And of course, I think that the arguments for the ethical and philosophical arguments that you've just made for privacy are extremely powerful. But how can we get this into the hands of people? And potentially, as a question for you, how are you able to expect the market to form around this foundational notion of privacy?
It's all about product market fit.
Right.
And that's why Nym, we started as a bunch of hardcore devs and researchers, and now we're hiring people from Proton Mail, from Revolut, who have product market fit experience. And basically, you have to build a product. It sounds so simple, but it's so hard in practice,
Right.
that people want to use, and that ideally they'll even pay to use.
Right. Because
Right.
the privacy products out there are kind of bad, right? Can we agree
Yeah.
on this? I
Oh,
mean, even
no.
VPNs, they're not that. I mean, the user experience is not
No, it's
great.
terrible, because most
Right.
of the VPNs don't engage in making the UX better.
Right.
They don't engage in making the tech better. They've got a captive market. They sit on that market. They're kind of okay with it. Maybe they compete with each other, but they're also bad.
Well, and even at the product level, they don't enable the amount of privacy that we probably need, right?
And even Apple recognized this. You saw Apple launch Apple Private Relay, but the problem with Apple Private Relay, it kind of looks like a VPN or Tor, but all the nodes are controlled by Apple, so you have to trust Apple 100%.
So it's just Apple servers.
It's just Apple servers, yeah. So I mean, whatever. If that's people can make their own choice there, but I would say it's probably better to have a more decentralized alternative.
Sure.
And so the key is not just to have the back end, the infrastructure fast. The key is to make a usable user interface, and eventually to make the core technology of privacy inherently invisible, so that it's just things work about the same speed, but by default they're private and not public. And we think at Nym, our current strategy to get product market fit is we're looking at VPN products. Sure, there are power users that can use Nym today. You can integrate it against wallets. You can use it with Blockstream Green. You can use it with Telegram. We've got a few thousand people using Nym today, but we don't want a few thousand people. We want hundreds of thousands, millions. Last thing I worked on at MIT, a billion people, probably 2 billion people use it. So we gotta get to that level. In order to get that level, we have to have something so simple that it's understandable, that turns on, that gives people the right kind of feedback if it's on or off, and so forth. And this is all about user experience, product market fits. And, all the philosophical defense and political defense of privacy sounds very idealistic. But I think if you really believe in your ideals, and not just for privacy, but for anything, if you really believe in your ideals, you have to be practical about it. You have to say, how can I get to accomplish these ideals in the real world? That's what a revolutionary should do. And for someone producing privacy enhancing technology, it's all about finding that product market fit and building an interface that like Joe Rogan can understand.
Yeah.
And we think, we do believe, that's possible.
Sure.
And we do believe that, people are creeped out. You search for shoes on Google and that shoe advertisement follows you around all day.
Mm-hmm.
You want to vote for one candidate, but that candidate, the other people don't like them, and maybe the government doesn't like them. You want to discuss something on Twitter, and you got your account blocked, you got banned. We think that these technologies will eventually, like more ordinary people are kind of turning on to the problems of freedom and censorship and privacy, because the amount of control and surveillance and censorship is currently a little spooky. It's not quite a level where I think everyone's going to jump, but things change quickly, right? Encryption worked on 10% of the internet. Snowden revelations happened. Boom. Now it's like 95%. And it took only 2 or 3 years. Because all some people say, well, it's really realistic that people just can.
People moved quickly on this.
People move quickly. Yeah. Big companies as well. Governments moved very quickly on this.
Mm-hmm.
And we think, there might be some privacy 9/11 style event. Maybe, I don't know, could be anything. Could be ExpressVPN leaks all the credit card data of all their users. We've been working a lot on a privacy enhanced payment so that we can't do that. Maybe, it came out a few days ago. Russia is monitoring the metadata, even of Signal messages in Ukraine, because everyone in Ukraine's on Signal.
Of course. So
all of a sudden, things can become very big. And we don't know when that moment will be, but we need to get that core beachhead market with a good user experience, start growing it, build that loyal community. We've already got a great Pineapple proxy. We've already got a great small loyal community in Nym.
Yeah.
But we think that when these events pick up, these chaotic events, we can use chaos as a ladder so people become aware of these issues. And then as long as something there they can just kind of turn on, they'll turn it on. We do believe that will be the case.
So you're not afraid of the chaos?
No. We think there's one certainty: things will get worse before they get better, and that.
But they will get better.
They will get better, but we need to spread awareness.
Yeah.
And we can do all the marketing we want, but ultimately, it's just like, people say, "Oh, climate change is crazy." what can we do? And now you've got, 44 degrees Celsius,
Yeah.
right? In Greece. I don't know how people can survive that way. I've got friends in Iraq, 50 degrees Celsius, basically inhumanly hot. Rivers drying up. Now it's obvious. Now we should do something. And it's not too late. It's never too late. And we think the same thing is going to happen with privacy, that people are going to be more and more aware of it. And we just have to have those easy to use solutions. And we're seeing uptake. We're seeing Proton Mail doing better and better. Brave doing better and better. DuckDuckGo doing better and better. There is a small group that's growing. And what matters is not how many users you have. What matters is the growth rate. Is it consistent? Is it going ideally exponential? And we're not quite there with privacy, but I have a lot of hope. And I don't think it's not just zero knowledge. It's not just financial transactions. It's much bigger. I actually think people ask me, "Are you a Bitcoin maximalist? Are you an Ethereum maximalist?" I said, "No, I'm a privacy maximalist. I believe privacy is the foundation for all this tech. I'm a privacy maximalist because I'm a freedom maximalist, and we need this tech." And so I'm certain the market will take off.
Harry, final question. What is the best way for people to learn more about Nym, to interact with them, and potentially to even start using it?
Yeah, I mean, it works today. We've done a token launch. You can turn on a node and get rewarded in those Nym tokens if you're mixing traffic.
Yep.
We have a white paper. The white paper is on our website, nymtech.net. We also produce a lot of other kind of papers on other parts of the system as they mature. So you can read all about it. We have very easy to read developer docs. We're built in Rust, so we have a Rust SDK. If you're a JavaScript developer, we have a JavaScript SDK because we converted. It's like quite easy as a programmer to get your head. It's a big system to get your head around, but once to use it's actually quite easy to integrate against. It's quite easy.
Yeah.
But what we really need is just ordinary people to get interested in it. And so you can download some experimental software today called Nym Connect. Nym Connect lets you run Bitcoin over Nym, lets you run Monero over Nym, lets you run Telegram over Nym. We think most of the users over Nym are using Telegram because Telegram's where a lot of the crypto folks hang out at. And eventually we want to see it integrated into Signal, Zcash, and other things as well. But you can download Nym Connect today and use it. You can jump on our Telegram channel. That's NymChan, NYMCHAN, like 4chan or channel. I'm in the Telegram chat. We have weekly events. We keep the community updated. We have an email subscription list. Any way that you want. We have tons of videos online, and we need people. What we really need, we probably have enough people running mixed nodes. What we really need is people to start downloading the software, using it, and giving us feedback. So a lot of our focus over the next 6 months is going to be build better and more usable software and have better and better feedback so we can really work all the community into our processes and continue to kind of decentralize the entire network. So it's going to be really exciting days. We have all these plans. We can transition the governance into a DAO, so forth and so on, launching anonymous credentials, doing all sorts of rewarding developers automatically for building on Nym through the Nix Cosmos blockchain. We have a lot going on, and we aren't like the most well-known project in the world. What we're doing is dramatically different than everyone else.
Right.
But I do think it's cool tech. So if you're a tech person, you get involved. If you just care about privacy, just try it out and tell us what you think. It matters. It means a lot to us. So
thank you for working on this foundational piece of human freedom.
No, and thank you. I mean, the thing is, Lior, things were looking very grim in late 2018, early 2019. And I think the one thing that you did is you bet hard on us when almost no one else would. And the technology barely worked. We had like an academic demo.
Yeah.
And now you've seen we're now no longer 8 people. We're 50 people. We're working hard, but without that early support from yourself and a few other people, we wouldn't have made it this far. So I'm always happy to talk to you.
Well, your journey has been by far one of the most impactful journeys that I've been able to live vicariously through you. And of course, I'm going to be here every step of the way.
Yeah, it's not over yet. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Harry. Thanks.